July 26, 1920. School Street, Boston. The morning paper has just called this man insolvent, finished, a fraud. And so the crowd outside his office stretches around the block, all of them demanding their money back. Now watch what he does. He doesn't run. He doesn't hide. He walks into the crowd, smiling, and serves them coffee and doughnuts. He pays every single withdrawal, in full, in cash, over $1 million in one day. And by that same afternoon, people who came to rescue their savings are handing them back to him. The scam was already dead. The victims just refused to believe it. His name was Charles Ponzi, and the lie he told was so seductive, we ended up naming the entire crime after him. This is how he did it, and why it can never, ever work. Boston, August 1919. Charles Ponzi is 37 years old. An Italian immigrant with a criminal record he keeps quiet. Forgery in Montreal. Smuggling migrants across the border. He landed in America, by his own telling, with $2.50 in his pocket. Now he's a clerk with a desk, a typewriter, and a young wife named Rose he cannot afford to spoil. Then an envelope arrives from Spain. Inside it, a small square of paper called an international reply coupon. A coupon bought in Spain for about 30 centavos can be swapped in Boston for a 5-cent American stamp. And because the war has wrecked Europe's currencies, that little square of paper is worth more here than it cost over there. Buy money cheap in Rome, sell it dear in Boston. Ponzi does the arithmetic, and his hands start to shake. On paper, it's better than 10%, legal, printed, government-issued profit. He has found, he believes, a machine that turns postage into gold. In December, he opens a company with a name built to sound like Wall Street, the Securities Exchange Company. The promise is printed right on the note, 50% interest in 45 days, 100% in 90. Here is what nobody in the queue stops to ask. Follow the coupon. Lira buys coupon. Coupon crosses the ocean. Coupon becomes a stamp. A stamp, not cash. There is no counter anywhere on earth where a man can slide across a mountain of postage stamps and walk away with dollar bills. The final step of the machine, the only step that matters, does not exist. To actually move real money, Ponzi would need to buy, ship, sort and redeem millions of paper squares, and the cost of doing that would eat the profit alive. The arbitrage is real, the business is impossible. So he skips it. He simply pays old investors with new investors' money. The machine was never postal, it was human. And Boston loses its mind. Agents fan out on 10% commission. Waitresses hand over tips. Priests bring parish funds. Policemen, the same men who will later arrest him, invest their savings. Rose's own family puts in $16,000. By the spring of 1920, they're accused down School Street, and by July, the Securities Exchange Company is swallowing $250,000 a day. 40,000 investors. Roughly $15 million in 8 months, call it $250 million today. Ponzi buys a 12-room mansion in Lexington. Air conditioning, a heated pool. He buys diamonds for Rose, and he buys something sweeter than any of it, a controlling stake in Hanover Trust, the bank that 1 year earlier had refused to lend him $2,000. The clerk they turned away now owns the building. But look at the ledger underneath the mansion. Every 45 days, whatever he owes grows by half. $1 million becomes $1.5 million, becomes $2.25 million. The debt isn't a number, it's a spiral, and it only spins one way. July 24th, the Boston Post puts him on the front page as a hero. Doubles the money within 3 months. The story is meant as news, it lands as advertising, and the queues double. 2 days later the Post turns. Questions, doubts, the first crack. The run begins, and now we're back at the scene where we started. Coffee, donuts, $1 million paid out with a smile. Understand what that smile cost. Every dollar he hands back is a dollar of other people's money, and he knows, better than anyone alive, that the drawer is nearly empty. The confidence is the last asset he has. And it works. The line reverses. Boston looks at a man calmly paying every claim and concludes the paper must be wrong. That afternoon, withdrawals turn back into deposits. It is the single greatest performance in the history of fraud, and it buys him exactly 7 more days. Because confidence can beat a headline, but it cannot beat arithmetic. Enter Clarence Barron, financial publisher, the sharpest numbers man in America. Barron asks one question no investor thought to ask: how many coupons would this operation actually require? For Ponzi to cover what he owes, there would need to be about 160 million international reply coupons moving through his hands. The post office checks its books. Worldwide, on the entire planet, there are about 27,000. 160 million against 27,000. The machine would need 6,000 times more fuel than exists on Earth. And then comes the detail that ends the fable. Auditors will eventually open the books of the Securities Exchange Company, the enterprise holding $15 million of Boston's savings, and they will find its total stock of postal coupons comes to $61. 61, not million, dollars. Then his own publicity man, William McMasters, sells the truth to the Post for $5,000. The great Ponzi, he writes, is hopelessly insolvent. Now the dominoes fall in order. August 2nd, McMaster's story detonates across the front page. August 9th, bank examiners find Ponzi's account at his own Hanover Trust overdrawn. He owns the vault, and even that vault is empty. August 11th, the Post lands the final blow. A photograph from Montreal, 1908. A young forger who called himself Charles Bianchi. Same face, same smile. Boston's golden man has done all of this before. August 12th, Charles Ponzi puts on his best suit and surrenders to federal agents. The audit finds a hole of $7 million. Hanover Trust collapses and drags 5 more banks down with it. Even the state's own treasury had money inside. Investors eventually claw back less than 30 cents on the dollar. The Boston Post wins the Pulitzer Prize. Rose sells the mansion. Here is the part they never tell you about con men. Prison doesn't cure the condition. Ponzi serves 3.5 years federal. Massachusetts convicts him again, and while he's out on bail, he surfaces in Florida, selling swampland. Underwater lots, sold by the acre, at triple your money promises. The man on bail for a pyramid builds another pyramid. He's caught. He serves his state term, and in October 1934, the country he conned deports him. He never was a citizen. Rose stays through every prison year. Then finally, in 1937, she lets go. She never remarries. He drifts to Brazil, a desk job with an airline, then not even that. And in January 1949, Charles Ponzi dies in the charity ward of a Rio de Janeiro hospital, with $75 to his name, exactly enough to be buried. Near the end, a reporter found him, and Ponzi, older, half-blind, still smiling, gave the quote that tells you everything about the species. "It was easily worth $15 million to watch me put the thing over. No apology, no shame. To the end, he graded the con like a performance and gave himself a standing ovation. The 40,000 people who lost everything were, to him, the price of admission. That is the villain's arithmetic. Your savings, his show." Charles Ponzi died broke. The scheme never did. Every generation, it comes back wearing new clothes. In the 1920s, it was postal coupons. Decades later, a man on Wall Street ran the exact same spiral for 17 years at $65 billion. His name was Bernie Madoff, and we've already told his story. It's on your screen now. The promise is always the same: high returns, no risk, and a reason you shouldn't look too closely at the machine. So when someone offers you 50% in 45 days, remember the man the crime is named after. Remember the $61. Like, share, and subscribe. Every fortune has a villain. We find them. Hi, I'm Vincent Volt, and this is Money Villains. If today's villain shocked you, like, share, and subscribe. Every fortune has a villain. See you in the next one.